Murkomen is a very interesting minister. Just have a look at his new Frankenstein, and I quote. This is from Money Academy Kenya. Kenyans can now download and print birth certificates online, ending the need to visit Huduma centers to collect them. Now in this video, I want us to look into some of the reasons why this new system is good and also why it might be a disaster. And so with no further ado, let's get after it. Now for the bad, this new feature allows corrupt government officials to cement fake identities for criminals. For example, now you can get a Kenyan ID and a passport. That's as at now. In case people become suspicious or curious about you because you suddenly sprang into existence, if they go back to check the records, they will now also be able to find your fraudulent birth certificate in the system. So in short, who can stop Murkomen from printing 400,000 new millennials and using them to vote in 2027? The answer is simple, just about no one. Have a look at this tweet for context, and I quote. This is from Shola Ad. Breaking, Murkomen announces Kenyans can now download birth certificates online, claiming it's a response to Jukwaa la Usalama forums. But think, first, vetting was removed. Then reports of IDs now being sold to Ethiopians and Somalia citizens. Then, US sanctions exposed Hemedi's brother and other world criminals holding a Kenyan passport. Now birth certificates, the foundation of IDs, passports, and citizenship records, are going digital. Do you see what I am seeing? What guarantees exist that this new platform won't be exploited by fraudsters, criminal networks, or corrupt insiders? Question mark. The answer to that question from the Murkomen camp is that each birth certificate you print, it comes with a QR code which you can scan and it will tell you if it's authentic or not. Any Gen Z today can create a QR code in a matter of seconds. There is no real security and safety feature here. I would prefer that these birth certificates are issued at the place of birth. Mahali umezaliwa, upigwe picha pale, all your details ichukuliwe pale ya wazazi, and then that is where you collect your birth certificate. But the moment you take it online, anybody can fake anything. For all Ruto cares, he can increase the population by 1 million by backtracking and creating 1 million millennials wamezaliwa 1985 wakisikiza Michael Jackson, na wanarudi huku 2027 wanawapea vitambulisho na wanawaregister as voters, and they distribute them to different polling stations and they vote on their behalf digitally. You get where we are going with this issue? This is not something that should be passed now when we are having elections next year. Even if it's a good idea, let people be time conscious and sensitive, because sometimes it's not that you're doing the wrong thing, it's the timing. If you usually step out to pick your calls and you're called at midnight and you're with your wife in bed, will you step out to pick that call? Even if it is a contractor calling you, she will suspect you. The same way Kenyans will suspect this regime for introducing this when elections are next year. They should leave it for next year. Whichever government takes office, waamue kama tutafanya hii ama tutafanya. Let it now be a proposal. Let this now be the time for public participation. But to them, they've already rammed it through. They're looking to create 1 million newborn babies who are digital and exist in the cloud. Second reason why this is a bad idea is the fact that our national records are now subject to cyber attacks. This isn't new. There's a time the entire e-citizen platform was under cyber attack. Kama ulinunua gari hiyo wakati ungepata logbook, assuming hii mambo ya birth certificate ilikuwa pale, mtu amezaliwa hiyo wakati, itachelewa kidogo. In fact, the day you were born might not be the real date that reflects on the birth certificate, because the system is down, because there is a cyber attack, because. Those are the things we don't want. Mtu akizaliwa November 2, system ikuwe chini paka November 8. Sasa ati 8 ndo ile anaweza weka. No, we don't want that. But anywho, that's just my opinion, guys. Let's see what Kenyans on X have to say about this. And I quote, Wamura said, such an important document as birth certificate is not to be trifled with. Having known how carefully you gotta be with it, it would be such an insult to those who have cared for such documents. Were this a trustworthy process, then why not a single huge sigh of relief? It's quite damning. Cheriot Korir said, all the records come from the hospital where the child is born. Kwanza fathers, if your ID copy isn't scanned when the child is being registered at birth with issuance of birth notice, then your name won't appear on the birth certificate, or you need to apply for amended birth certificates. Weissman said, so hospitals can now just download and issue birth certificates at birth, but individuals can't at elections. Hey, this perceived country to be. Birth certificates should come from IDs that can be cut out when they mature. Mr. Jenga Mr. said, Moi destroyed our currency and passport. This guy is destroying anything that was built before him. Murkomen is weak. If we arrest Ruto, he will be exposed. And if we want to cement Ruto at committee, we must go for the soft belly of the crocodile, and that's Murkomen. We are mejangori. Hello. Voice of Reason said, points to a real integrity problem. When those vital documents come into question, the consequences will be dire and will be felt for generations to come. To understand how big a problem this is, look how closely developed nations guard their ID documents. But what say you guys? Do drop me your comments in the comment section below and I'll do best to read them and give you a response. So with that, here today's ads of the day. If you're still managing rentals using notebooks and caretakers, see how Joel Karangu Miner switched to a system that runs his 76 units automatically. Every month, caretakers traveled to his office with handwritten records. Balancing the math took hours. Payments never merged and tenants never got receipts. Then Joel switched to Bomahat, Kenya's award-winning property management software. Now payments update automatically, receipts go out via SMS, and every report is just one click away. He now runs all 76 units from his phone. No chaos, no confusion. Join hundreds of landlords doing the same. For more information, please call 0717 512 483 or visit www.bomahat.com. If you're in need of electrical wiring, solar installation, or electrical fittings such as strip lights, snake lights, downlighters, or chandeliers, contact Engineer Wycliffe at 0707 476602 and he'll get your house dapped up. And if you're here for the first time, please go on and hit the subscribe button. And if you're watching from a different platform, just head on over to YouTube, search for David Wafula. Hit the subscribe button, you're going to be getting a ton of content of this nature. If politics is something you're passionate about, this is definitely the one channel that you really need to subscribe to. Alright guys, adios. Thank you for choosing David Wafula as your primary news platform. We put countless hours in research, recording, and editing. By showing up each and every day to watch our videos, you encourage us to generate more videos for the viewers. We are on a mission to inform, educate, and build a better tomorrow. To our thousands of followers in a world full of presidents, kings, and queens, you are the real gem. Adios.